Thank you, Ms. Haney. I'll opt not to use my 30-second rebuttal, Mr. Thomas. All right, Brad Anders, you get the first question from our viewers. It is, what is the biggest challenge facing Knox County, and how would you tackle it?
John, I believe the biggest challenge facing Knox County is really our infrastructure. We're growing at a pace that's outpacing our ability to build roads, schools, and the infrastructure necessary for those folks coming in. In the next few years, the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to add up to 50,000 people in our population. We got to have a place to put them. We got to have a place to move them. We got to have places for them to work. And so I think the county having a 30-year-old road plan and not having anything updated in that in the next 30 years is something that we're going to have to take care of day one.
Mr. Jacobs, same question.
The biggest issue that we face is the opioid crisis and the drug crisis. Currently, the detention center has a little over 1,000 beds. It's full. All of the county facilities are full. Almost everyone in the detention center is there because of some sort of drug-related crime. This is a problem we are not going to be able to incarcerate our way out of. What we need to do is we need to all work together to solve this problem, to come together as a community. The mayor's office's role is to build and to lead a coalition, community members, the private sector, the government, of course, first responders, nonprofits, and other organizations to help address this problem. And the government cannot do it alone, but it does have a role.
Mr. Thomas, the biggest challenge facing Knox County?
I think it's the opioid crisis as well. If you think about it, when Lakeshore closed, the old saying that, Knox County Jail became the largest mental health facility just east of Nashville, and it's very true. We've been recycling people through there. They get off their medicines, they're arrested for nonviolent crimes, and we're running them out there, bringing them back, we're putting them on their meds. We're spending last I checked, it was over $500,000 a year. It may have increased by now, just putting them back on their medicines and housing them over there. There are like 1,300 people or so in the Knox County Jail. One of the biggest things I think we did in the past few months was the Behavioral Health Center. I saw some of the Helen Ross McNabb people in the audience. It was a very difficult decision for a lot of people in the neighborhood, but it's something we've got to do better. We've got to take care of these people who have a problem, can't get off of these drugs, and they're not criminals necessarily. They're breaking the law as far as nonviolent crimes. But we've got to give them a chance to get off of those drugs. And I think that's going to be a first step that may prove to be something very successful.
Ms. Gallman.
Well, my answer to that is being able to accept the truth, being able to be real. I believe, and from my studies and surveys, is that Knox County has an identity crisis. And that actually ties into the opiate crisis, which I like to call the opiate war. The reason why I call it a war is because people are actually dying. There are casualties. Someone is dying as we speak due to that. Another biggie is school security, safety. With the opiate crisis and our safety in our school systems, everyone is concerned. And anytime the media gets a hold of these stories with modern technology, we have our students now paying close attention, and everyone is becoming alarmed and afraid. So I think we have to be careful how we spread the news. And I think that with the opiate crisis, we had the warning with the cocaine war. The writing was on the wall then. What I don't understand is why are we making more room for inmates when we need to expand and have more beds for those that are mentally ill and drug addicted. And once we get a grip on that, we can move forward.
Ms. Haney.
I believe the biggest challenge is our educational system. I think that we have to find a way to make every school and every zip code safe and accessible and have all the needs that every student needs. I also think our teachers need to get higher pay. They need to have a bigger voice in what they are doing at the schools. And that can lead into correcting the drug addiction problem, because if we educate our children at an early age, if we have good teachers and we are able to bring good teachers and pay them well, I think that we can improve the whole county. Education, to me, is really the basis of everything. It's the biggest part of our budget, and I believe it's the best way for us to progress in Knox County.
Glenn Jacobs, the second question you'll lead off on is how will you ensure that neighborhoods are safe, and how will you measure that success?
Well, again, I think this goes back to the opioid epidemic. The problem that we have is a situation where, again, almost everyone in the detention center, it's a drug-related crime. So until we get our arms around the opioid epidemic, we're not going to have safe neighborhoods. The way we currently treat this problem is we just throw people in jail. And then they get out, and they're back out on the street, and then they're either back on drugs or they're overdosing. Across the state of Tennessee, overdoses have overtaken highway deaths now as a leading cause of death, and that's horrible. So what we have to do is initially, when it looks like people have a problem through things like drug courts, intervene early on to get them help at that point. So hopefully they don't ever get into the criminal justice system. If they do, when they come out, we have to provide support so that they don't end up back out on the streets committing crimes, getting drug-related crimes, or again, overdosing and dying. Until we get our arms around the opioid epidemic, that's the whole key, I believe, to having safe neighborhoods.
Mr. Thomas.
This is something that I ran across that disturbed me about 2 years ago. A lady was in her home, a senior, and she went to the door. Somebody knocked on the door. She's at home alone because her husband had passed. And she opened the door, had that glass door in between her and the big door. And somebody was trying to sell something to her. So she said, "No, I don't want any. Please go away." And she closed the door back. He proceeded to beat on the door for another 10 minutes, scaring this lady who felt endangered in her own home. And when she described this to me, I don't know how this happens. This is a well-populated neighborhood, but I don't know how this happens in the middle of the day in Knox County. So I researched it, and you're supposed to get a $10 permit to go door to door to sell things. And very few even do that. And then if somebody calls and said, "This person's harassing me, they won't go away," if the sheriff deputy comes out, 9 times out of 10, the person's already gone. But there you got that senior who is feeling unsafe in their own home. We've got to somehow figure out how to make our seniors and our veterans safe in their own homes, because we've got all these baby boomers. That's one of the biggest populations of Knox County. So we can't turn our back on that. We've got to figure out how to make them safer.
Ms. Gallman, your answer to that question.
Do you mind asking the question
Not at all.
again? Thank you.
How will you ensure that neighborhoods are safe, and how will you measure the success?
First of all, I am not the sheriff, and we have to allow them to do their job. But what I will do is I will go out and engage with the community, and also I am a big surveyor, so I enjoy meeting and engaging with people from all levels. Well, if it's going to be about we, the people are going to tell us what they need. I'm going to encourage more participation in neighborhood associations. Also, small groups and organizations play a major role in this. Those small groups whose voices are rarely ever heard, a lot of the people, even just riding a trolley, I'm a trolley rider and I ride Uber, you would be amazed at the information that you hear from everyday people. And what I would be doing is following up and calling back to ask the people, how is your neighborhood? How are things going? With the opiate crisis right now, until we can get the rehabilitation and make sure that we have adjacent programs, because even with the behavioral health system, after 3 days, what happens? Where do you go from there? It takes 30 days to create a new habit, so how can we expect people to be off drugs or be whole after 72 hours?
Ms. Haney.